Number 1, Shogun Showdown. This game is a turn-based tactics roguelike where every fight happens on a single lane board of 4 to 12 tiles. You and the enemies all crammed in together like a feudal subway car. Moving costs a turn, turning around costs a turn, queuing an attack costs a turn, and actually firing the damn queue costs a turn too. So the whole game is this tactical kerfuffle of setting up 3 attacks, dodging what's coming, and not getting stabbed in the back while waiting for the cooldowns. Enemies telegraph their moves and follow similar timing rules, which means you're planning 3 turns ahead, forcing enemies into each other, pulling them into range with chains, and setting up knockbacks so that they clear the lane before reinforcements crash the party. The main mechanic all of this swirls around is using that queue system. You collect tiles instead of cards, swords, spears, bows, backstabs, smoke bombs, debuffs, and you can only queue 3 at a time before firing, so every tile you add has to earn its slot. Upgrades let you boost damage, cut cooldowns, or add keywords like quick play that lets you queue a tile without burning a turn, and the whole thing evolves into builds where you're chaining cursed effects into heavy finishers or throwing enemies behind you so that they kill each other while you're standing just out of range. There are 5 individual characters with completely different starting kits, from the baseline samurai to a grappler who turns the lane into a wrestling match, and meta progression is light but steady, mostly unlocking new tiles and difficulty layers. Runs are between 30 to 50 minutes depending on how much you overthink each move, but when it clicks, you'll understand the beauty in queuing 3 perfect attacks and watching the whole board play out exactly how you planned it 2 turns ago. Absolute cinema. Number 2, He is Coming. This is a roguelite RPG auto-battler built around a 3-day loop. Daytime gives you space to explore, gather relics, and reshape your loadout, and then night falls, and your build gets tested in fully automated battles against monsters, mini-bosses, or worse. The gameplay is brisk, 5 to 10 minutes per run, and every 3rd night a new hunter shows to ruin your plans, but the game's polite enough to let you know what's coming, so you can either counter it or perish with dignity. There are over 350 items and barely enough inventory space to carry your hopes, so every run becomes a build puzzle. Speed stacking, poison chains, reflect armor, vampiric regeneration, or just sprinting in circles while things explode. Of course, there's no one correct build, just ones that survive longer than others, and if yours does survive, it becomes a boss in someone else's run thanks to Kingmaker mode, which is basically PvP without the part where you have to interact with other people. If you like old school graphical charm, short runs, and weird synergies, boy, get on in here. Number 3, Dungreed. So here we are. A town has been eaten by a dungeon, and the local government's response is to send you in with a weapon and a flexible health plan. This entails that you will be diving into procedurally arranged prisons, jungles, and molten corridors, grabbing gear, dodging traps, and trying not to evaporate on a boss you underestimated. There are no checkpoints or safe saves, so every death kicks you back to town with your pockets a little bit lighter and your pride a little bit denteder. That town is your hub, and as you rescue NPCs, you rebuild it piece by piece into shops, training halls, and shrines that give you better tools for the next plunge, which is good because the dungeon has absolutely zero interest in meeting you halfway. Between weapons, armor, accessories, elemental tags, and an ability system in the training center, you can go crazy with rapid crit spam, near constant dashing, or thick defensive setups that heal and shrug off hits. The food adds another layer, since dishes give chunky buffs as well as healing, and if you go deep into the mystic side of things, you can even keep a favorite item from one run to the next and build your whole plan around it. Harder modes and extra episodes gives those power setups something nasty to chew on, while the altar and town upgrades keep long-term goals in play even when a run goes bad. When you put everything together, Dungreed is about turning a swallowed town, an ever-hungry dungeon, and a ridiculous stat sheet into one big ongoing experiment in controlled chaos. And let's be honest, that's the meaning of life anyway. Number 4, Desktop Survivors 98. Your PC has been infected, but instead of calling IT, you've grabbed a cursor and decided violence was the better option. Desktop Survivors 98 is a roguelike bullet heaven that runs directly on top of your actual desktop, where solitaire cards, minesweeper tiles, and definitely not Clippy become your arsenal against waves of desktop icons that want you dead. The whole thing plays out in 60-second room bursts across randomly generated dungeon floors with no overall timer, but plenty of reasons to keep your mouse hand steady, because enemies scale with every room you clear, and the screen fills fast enough to punish anyone who thought parking the cursor in a corner was a valid strategy. The interesting part is how it frames everything through the lens of a computer that never got any IT support. You level up mid-room by picking stat boosts that lets you stack weapon synergies and passives until you're either a glass cannon that clears rooms in seconds, or a tank setup that shrugs off bullets altogether. And corruptions add even more complexity as you unlock software between runs, which are permanent upgrades, new weapons, and extra difficulty layers. Runs are short and self-contained, and you can minimize the whole thing back to your system tray like the world's most aggressive desktop widget, which is pretty cool. This game is exactly the kind of workplace distraction late 90s IT departments would spend entire budgets trying to block, because you wouldn't get anything done, ever. Number 5. Slots and Daggers. There's an evil lord that needs overthrowing, and the only tool available is a slot machine on a tavern table, which is either some of the worst game mechanics ever made, or exactly the kind of problems that we deserve. As mentioned, Slots and Daggers is a roguelike where fights are a series of slot machine pulls. Swords deal damage, shields block hits, coins buy upgrades. You spin, the enemy spins back, and you keep going until someone runs out of health, which sounds simple until you realize that every symbol you add to your reel increases your options, but tanks the odds of landing the combo that you need when the boss is 2 hits from wiping you. The whole thing is about managing probability and not getting greedy. Keep your reel lean and you'll land your best moves more often, but you're also vulnerable when things go sideways. Stuff it with every weapon and spell and you find that suddenly you're spending 3 coins when you desperately need a shield, which is the exact moment the game reminds you that randomness and builds don't always shake hands. Between fights, you dump coins into a shop for new symbols, upgrades, and passives, while a second currency unlocks permanent stuff like extra health, damage boosts, cheaper shops, or additional reels that let you bend the slot machine closer to something that you can actually control. The campaign is 10 levels of swamps, sewers, and citadels, full of strange little pixel guys with shields and resistances, and after that you get arena modes and infinite runs if the core loop has grabbed you. Slots and Daggers has sold over 100,000 copies in 10 days and is currently sitting at an overwhelmingly positive review score on Steam, which makes sense because it turns out a jazzy soundtrack, tactile slot effects, and the ability to one-shot a boss with a perfect crit stacked spin is a damn good time. Number 6. Mortal Sin. Someone decided medieval hellscapes needed more dismemberment and environmental murder. Thusly, we now have Mortal Sin, a first-person action roguelike where you hack through procedural dungeons full of monsters that need their limbs removed individually before they go the way of the dodo. You see, enemies have separate health pools for arms, legs, head, and torso, which means body shots just make them angry, while a clean decapitation or enough chopped appendages does the Lord's work. We're talking first-person melee with slashes, heavies, kicks, bashes, and parries that combo into shockwaves or brief invincibility windows if you time it right. The whole thing plays out a lot faster than you'd expect, closer to melee doom than any slow survival horror experience. Traps are everywhere and they'll kill you just as hard as you kill enemies, so fights turn into this aggressive dance of knocking monsters into spike walls while making sure you don't back into a saw blade amid the excitement. It's interesting how much the class system changes each run. There are around 15 classes, and they're not just stat tweaks. Hunter forces you to decapitate every regular enemy with thrusting weapons. Mage freezes time and swings massive AoE staves, while Martyr starts Curse with weak stats but a powerful weapon. You'll be layering loot and skill upgrades on top of your class setup, chasing synergies that turn into ridiculous power spikes like permastun builds or spinning berserker setups that delete entire rooms. Medic progression exists, but it's light. You unlock new classes, skills, and gear between runs, though player skill matters way more than grinding stats. The game has the aesthetic of a progressive metal album cover, and it hits like a damn truck, so if you don't mind a little bit of gore in your gameplay, you'll be glad you came. Number 7. Sulfur. In Sulfur, you're a priest lurching through randomized dungeons full of goblins, fungus cults, skeletal spookies, and other creatures that aren't legally allowed to unionize. Each run kicks off from your crumbling church hub and drops you into a first-person roguelike mess of winding corridors and twitchy gunplay. You'll be a shootin', a lootin', open suspicious doors in, and then either extract with your inventory intact or die clutching a piece of raw pork and a flaming revolver. Such is life. Your inventory is a Diablo-style grid, and you probably will spend 30 minutes trying to fit one overcompensating greatsword next to a jug of soup and a cursed frog hat, so be ready for that. Guns support a variety of attachments and oils, and come with recoil straight from the year 1999. Between runs, you'll upgrade the church with cabinets, racks, safes, and wardrobes that store your favorite loot and slowly make the place look like a deeply haunted pawn shop. In Sulfur, the real boss is your own greed, and how much junk exactly you can fit in that trunk. Your trunk. It's fun. Number 8. The King is Watching. This game gives you a grid of buildings and then a multi-tile spotlight called the Royal Gaze that you drag around like you're playing Tetris with your attention span. If that sounds strange, that's because it is. Only the tiles under that gaze actually do anything. Everything else goes idle. So you're constantly rotating between wheat production, troop training, and resource generation while waves of spoopy monsters march in from the right to smash your wall, and the whole time your economy is one bad gaze shift away from pooping the bed because you stared at the barracks when you should have been watching the farms. Runs gracefully feature pause and speed controls, making the game a shimmer of RTS base management with a side of tower defense. What keeps it from being pure chaos is the structure. Upcoming waves show on a timeline so you can plan around what's coming. Oracles let you trade harder fights for better loot, and between waves you're drafting artifacts, spells, and building upgrades that push your run in new directions with spell-heavy nukes, economy chains that feed huge armies, and tanky builds that grind through attrition. Placement is half the game, since squeezing the right combination of tiles into one gaze footprint means the difference between scaling smoothly and watching everyone starve while goblins make necklaces from their nipples. Meta progression unlocks new kings with different starting traits, additional maps, as well as permanent upgrades across several trees. Runs last between 30 to 60 minutes with a steep curve that will punish you, and the learning process is basically figuring out which 3 tiles deserve your attention while the other 13 sit there wondering if the king forgot they exist. A historian would call this inefficient micromanagement, but historians don't juggle a magic spotlight while their kingdom tries to function in their peripheral vision, so shut up. Number 9. Astral Ascent. Here you are dropped into a celestial prison with pretty wallpaper and crap neighbors. The garden is your hub, the zodiacs are your wardens, and every escape attempt is a side-scrolling sprint through 4 worlds packed with enemies, hazards, and one smug constellation waiting at the end of each zone. Your movements feel theatrical, double jumps, air dashes, wall hops, and ground slams binded to a spell-slinging combat system where every room is a test of timing and pattern recognition. Between your inevitable deaths, you stroll the garden, chat with NPCs, unlock new spells and upgrades, and then head back out to be shot at by Libra again. The real juice here lives in the spellcraft. Each character brings their own basic kit and signature abilities, and then you bolt on a rotating set of 4 spells, feed those spells a stack of gambits, push their elements, tack on auras that hook into dashes or stomps, and maybe throw in an echo that rewrites how a whole part of your kit behaves for good measure. One run soaked in gem-filled drill beams, another a dance of counters and parries, another still turns half your bar into pets and orbiting nonsense that chew through bosses while you concentrate on not landing in fire. It's all quite fun, and when a build comes together, the screen turns into a moving diagram of everything you've layered on, leaving a wake of destruction through an astral prison that refuses to stay solved. Number 10. Pasant. Someone somewhere looked at a game of chess and desperately wanted to add explosions, but instead of being institutionalized, they made Pasant. You start each run with a few vanilla pieces and a win condition that might be checkmate or triple checks or just kill or be killed. And then the shop opens up and hands you war crimes, dragon knights that jump and blast, archbishops with more range than your Wi-Fi, items that demote enemy queens out of spite, and global rule-twisting badges like all captures become miniature explosions. All you can do is rearrange your army and hope the enemy with 2 kings doesn't decide to make that your problem. There are 125 possible modifiers, including atomic captures, zombies, reflecting bishops, explosive units, self-resurrecting pieces, and that one badge that turns your own strategy into performance art. Early boards are manageable, but mid-run you're chasing synergies like a mage with a drug problem, and by the end you're fielding a board brimming with abstract violence, desperately trying not to forget that your own pawns explode when they get captured. You get 3 undos per round, which you'll probably use immediately, and a tutorial if you've forgotten how chess works under normal conditions, which this certainly isn't. Pasant is what happens when chess and chaos have a little baby boy, and that child is holding a flamethrower and asking to be promoted to queen. Number 12. Have a nice death. Death outsourced the reaping to middle management, and now the quarterly soul reports look like a tax audit from hell. So you grab your scythe, march through every department, and remind your executives why organization charts have a top. Have a Nice Death is a 2D action roguelike where you play as the overworked CEO of Death Inc., slashing through procedurally scrambled floors in departments like industrial pollution, toxic food processing, and modern warfare before taking down the sorrow boss that runs each one. Combat is fast, fluid hack-and-slash platforming, with your scythe as the anchor, plus 2 extra weapons or spells that range from hammers and bows to cloaks that act like melee tools. Every swing builds a frenzy meter that, once full, turns the whole screen into a beautiful HR violation. Builds spiral up through curses, which are card-based upgrades split across 3 color trees. Damage splits into real HP and injuries, a grayed out portion you can only reclaim with blue anima, while rarer golden anima or special items handle actual healing. Every hit feels half permanent, pushing you to play clean instead of tanking like a lunatic, which is why the game is famous for punishing carelessness and rewarding finesse. Outside runs, you unlock new curse families, starter perks, shortcuts to specific bosses, and roughly 15 breakdown tiers for players who measure success in pain. The whole thing doubles as a black comedy office satire, drawn in gorgeous hand-animated style like Tim Burton's version of a corporate burnout, only prettier and somehow less depressing than your last job review. Number 13. Drop Duchy. What we've got here is medieval statecraft meets Tetris, resulting in a roguelite deck builder where you're slotting tiles into a grid. Each piece is terrain like plains, forests, rivers, or mountains, sometimes with buildings bolted on, and when you complete a horizontal row, it explores and pays out resources based on what's in that line. Farms on plains generate food, sawmills next to forests pump wood, military bases convert that income into troops, and the board never clears, so you're literally building on top of older layers while trying to cram entire production chains into shared rows for ridiculous payouts. Your deck determines which tiles can appear, so adding or upgrading cards directly changes the pool of shapes that drop, and between rounds you're tuning that deck towards specific builds, perhaps a food engine that floods the map with soldiers, or a market-heavy Republic build that leans into trade, or a pious order run that turns faith into raw bonuses. Combat kicks in after the building phase, when your structures mint arrows, axes, and swords that clash in a rock-paper-scissors-esque spread. Arrows beat axes, axes beat swords, swords beat arrows. There's no real-time control, so all your tactics live in the board you built and the unit mix that you've committed to. If you didn't plan well, you're doing desperate math, hoping the numbers work out in your favor. Meta progression runs through a mission tree that unlocks new cards, factions, starting perks, and challenge maps, plus 2 DLC factions, the Tribe with druidic stone layouts, and the North with Viking-style raiders that bend the usual terrain rules in interesting ways. Once you know the systems, runs land under an hour, and by the end you're a very stressed out tile contractor with delusions of grandeur. But no one said that's a bad thing. Number 11, Coal LLC. Your employer is a friendly, everyday, evil coal corporation that gives you a daily quota and an implied death threat if you don't meet it, which is basically every retail job except the stakes are slightly more literal. Coal LLC is a mining management roguelite where your runs are a sequence of days with procedurally generated underground maps, strict time limits, and escalating quotas that eventually demand billions in coal because apparently sustainability isn't part of the business plan. Every morning, you'll drop into a new mine layout with your pickaxe, bombs, mortars, and other necessities, and you've got until the clock runs out to vacuum up enough ore to meet quota and not get fired in the most permanent way possible. In the early days, you're personally chipping through rock and hauling ore yourself, while in the late game, you're managing thousands of automated employees while high-tier electric pickaxes vaporize layers and your collectors swarm the map like a bunch of industrial locusts. Differing professions change how you approach the chaos, and different map layouts like Sky Mine or Tight Funnel mess with how cramped or vertical the digging gets. Between days, you're spending cash on upgrades that stack into degenerate builds, mortars that clear entire sections, vacuums that grab everything in range, and movement speed that turns you into a pickaxe-wielding blur. The game embraces incremental idle-style scaling, so runs go from barely meeting quota with a shoddy pickaxe to strip mining top layers in seconds while billions of employees handle the rest. Hard mode modifiers exist for people who thought the baseline pressure wasn't stressful enough, and there's a peaceful mode for anyone who just wants to mine without the existential threat of corporate quotas. This game satirizes late-stage capitalism by making you personally responsible for feeding the factories of industry, and what's more, have a damn good time doing it. Number 14, No Skin. You show up to a party a little impaired, and within 20 minutes the whole thing turns into a fucking nightmare, which is either extremely bad luck or a solid case for staying home forever. Or both. No Skin is a horror roguelike set inside a procedurally generated body horror-filled abode where you're carving through grotesque enemies, twisted events, and the occasional former friend who's now something you just want to light on fire. Art-wise, it is uncanny pixelated characters over photographic backgrounds, creating a tone that breeds dread and disorientation. Each run opens with lunar upgrades that globally alter your experience. Then you pick a character with different starting gear and perks and start weaving through the house one doomed space at a time. You'll manage weapons, consumables, and whatever's left of your mental stability before the run ends, usually badly. The combat is turn-based and stingy with information. You're choosing between stabbing, shooting, using items, or trying to escape, and whether you live often comes down to what you brought versus what the game randomly decided to hate you with. Bad calls kill you quickly, but you'll unlock new characters, weapons, and fragments of story that progress the path forward. The game blends mundane social horror with full supernatural oogie, mutated enemies, reality warping events, and sudden twists that turn safe rooms into the unsafest things on Earth. You'll chase multiple endings, uncover branching paths, and toggle difficulty modifiers that range from manageable to spiritually unwise. No Skin has been very well received, boasting an overwhelmingly positive review aggregate on Steam as of this recording, so scary as this party is, the real horror would be never getting an invitation in the first place. Number 15, Be My Horde. Most fantasy games cast you as the hero slaying monsters, but Be My Horde flips that around and makes you the necromancer, drowning the world in undead, which is honestly a way cooler career path. You play as Moriana, a necromancer whose whole deal is turning fallen enemies into new recruits for your ever-expanding army of zombies, exploding sheep, and whatever the hell else had the misfortune of dying near you. You'll act as a commander, drifting behind waves of undead that shield you from incoming threats and tear through peasants, warriors, knights, cavalry, and eventually bosses like King Richard and the devil himself. Progression splits between in-run perks and scrolls that boost resurrection, pile on damage effects, or add things like corpse explosions. The Dominion Hub is where you'll spend harvested souls on permanent upgrades, larger starting armies, tougher minions, stronger necromancy, and higher difficulty tiers for when you decide you're suffering suffering is not yet sufficient. The game is all about its villain fantasy, with stylized gore, dark jokes, and a soundtrack that fuses metal, jazz, and classical, which couldn't be more badass. Stages range from pastoral killing fields to hell zones with lava and meteor showers that munch through both you and your minions, and boss fights are hefty, multi-phase tests of whether your current build can keep the tide of undead alive long enough for you to survive. My Horde is still in early access, with a full launch plan for 2026, but the core mechanic of smiting your foes using a tidal wave of the undead is already solid enough to make necromancy feel like one of the most stable career options in fantasy gaming. Number 16. Forestrike. You're a martial artist wandering through a fantasy version of Imperial China, trying to rescue the Emperor from a rogue admiral, and your greatest power is, rehearsal. Forestrike gives you a meditation technique called Foresight that lets you run fights in your head as many times as it takes until you find the perfect win condition. Some moves get the same reactions, so combat becomes a puzzle. You preview how things will play out, test ideas, and then execute it in the real timeline with one shot. If Into the Breach put on a gi and took itself extremely seriously, it might look something like this. You're building your moveset from 5 martial arts masters, each with their own fighting philosophy. Counter focus, leaf style, heavy hitting iron style, slippery positioning tools, and each run is a branching map of fights, shops, inns, story nodes, and risky rewards. Synergies matter here. Stacking modifiers and choosing the right techniques can create ridiculous combos, but meta progression is minimal, so you're relying on smart picks and better execution, not stat creep. When everything comes together, it's like watching a perfect martial arts scene, and when it doesn't, you're a man in pajamas failing to punch ghosts because your timing was off by half a second. Forestrike turns Kung Fu into tactical theory crafting, and if that sounds stressful, congratulations, you're halfway to enlightenment. Number 17. Brutal Orchestra. It all starts with a murder, but then things get rapidly worse. Brutal Orchestra is a turn-based roguelike RPG that takes place in a grotesque afterlife known as the Primavera. You're dead, betrayed, and now walking through a purgatory stitched together from rot and passive-aggressive gods. The game's world is absurd as it is filthy, fascinated with the worst parts of the human body. Conversations ooze with bile, and characters look like failed gene editing experiments, yet the writing is surprisingly sharp, somewhere between gallows humor and a bad breakup letter written in the blood of a lover. The combat is layered, some would say mean-spirited, but in all the right ways. Abilities cost paint, which is basically bodily fluids, and managing it is as important as where you've parked each miserable little freak in your party. Positioning affects damage, targeting, and survival, with enemies eager to shove your team into traps just to watch them die. It's equal parts resource management and damage control, with permadeath lurking behind every poorly placed footstep. But despite the rot, the bile, and the screaming meat entities, the game holds an overwhelmingly positive review rating on Steam. Turns out suffering is way more fun than anyone could have possibly imagined. Number 18. Overlooting. Every dungeon crawler eventually asks what would happen if they added more loot, and Overlooting answers by turning the inventory screen into the main character. You are part of an unlikely trio trying to push back a dark force that's corrupting the world, picking one hero at the start of a run, from noble golden boy Maximilian to wanted thief Liz, or the Shadow, the ominous thing that everyone is initially blaming for the corruption. Looting equipment is your real job, however. Every piece belongs to a set, and stacking enough pieces from that set unlocks unique bonuses that bend your build in new directions. Between fights, you'll also climb a skill tree that changes every game. picking only a handful of skills per run, which means your kit is never quite the same twice, and some attempts will be carefully tuned strategies while others are disasters. You may be so coy as to pretend we're deliberate. Combat plays out in turn-based encounters, where your party and enemies trade abilities while gear sets and skills do most of the heavy lifting, and at the end of each region, a boss shows up to test whether your clever choices were actually clever or just a long-handed method of losing. The power fantasy here arises from abusing that set system and the ever-changing skill tree until your build finally coheres into something that should probably be illegal. Matching gear pieces to stack multipliers, upgrading duplicates into stronger, starred versions, and pairing them with just the right 9 or so skills lets you create things like hyper-defensive brick walls that smush health bars, or fragile glass cannons that erase bosses before they can even finish their monologue. Runs will reset when you wipe, but meta progression keeps unlocking new equipment sets, skills, and higher challenge levels, so the loot pool gets stranger and the synergy space gets bigger every time. It looks like cozy pixel dungeon crawler on the surface, but Overlooting is really a game about staring at an equipment screen, making one greedy decision after another, and discovering that you accidentally build a monster that clears regions while you sit there pretending this was your plan from the very beginning. Number 19, Vampire Hunters. This game is an action roguelite FPS that initiates you into PS1 era blocky arenas full of vampires, demons, werewolves, and gargoyles, and then lets you stack revolvers, shotguns, holy water hoses, and bubble throwers until your arsenal is firing everything at once and the screen looks like a damn light show with occasional enemy silhouettes. Each hunter has a unique skill tree that shifts how runs will play out, with waves ramping from target practice to existential crisis, and mid-run upgrades will pile up until you're wielding 14 guns at once, because reloads are for pussycats. Combat blends old school arena chaos with bullet hell swarms. Threats will pour in from all directions, and the game encourages hoarding instead of making you choose like a responsible adult. Progression follows traditional roguelite rules. Death resets you, but permanent upgrades will carry forward, and modes like Survivor for horde defense or Classic for stage progression offer some diversity in how you rip and tear. Builds vary wildly, since SMG, flamethrower, holy water sets play nothing like rocket-heavy loadouts or sword-chainsaw hybrids, other than the fact that they all create a localized apocalypse, that is. Released in October 2024 after early access, Vampire Hunters holds strong to its premise of holding every gun ever made all at once with the kind of dedication usually reserved for refusing to make a second trip for groceries. Off-screen indicators will try to help you when things get crammed, but once you're juggling 14 weapons into a tide of undead, situational awareness becomes more of a fond memory. And it's just glorious. Number 20, Atomic Crops. You inherited a farm, and then nuclear war happened, so now you're growing mutated crops by day and fighting off radioactive monsters by night, which is arguably still better than trying to afford farmland in the real world. Atomic Crops is a bullet hell roguelite where your homestead is also your battlefield, and your crops are both your income and bait for the horrifying biome spawn that tries to destroy them. You'll plant, water, and fertilize crops in rapid bursts, and then defend your tiny patch of soil from waves of irradiated rabbits, flying skulls, and shotgun-wielding bugs. Every harvest is a mad dash to scale up your farm just fast enough to survive the next night, and every season ends in a boss fight that's one part bullet hell, one part farming simulator, and one part reality check. Progression is chaos masquerading as agriculture. Between waves, you can ride a warthog into town to buy seeds, weapons, or even marry people. Yeah, because yes, this game lets you recruit spouses who water your plants and fire automatic weapons, which is both romantic and agronomically efficient. Weapons include everything from crossbows to orbiting lasers, and upgrades are mostly absurd combos like a tractor that vaporizes enemies while plowing fields, or bees that'll boost your harvest and also commit bee violence. Atomic Crops takes the idea of what if Stardew Valley had radiation and violence, and follows through with complete sincerity, right down to the part where you're fertilizing carrots during a firefight with a mutant snail and wondering when this became your life. And number 21 is Super Fantasy Kingdom. You're the monarch of a crumbling pixel kingdom, and your job is to survive for 12 increasingly absurd days while everything around you craps the bed. In Super Fantasy Kingdom, you build up a village, assign heroes, and pray your economy doesn't fall apart before the wolves, undead, or meteor strikes come to town. Combat happens automatically. You place buildings, gather wood and stone, assign your wizard to the east wall, and then sit back as wave after wave of monsters politely dismantle your defense strategy while your villagers wonder why the king is mostly just standing around clicking things. Your heroes will auto-fight with everything from spells to bows to swords, while you focus on expanding production chains, unlocking buffs, and re-rolling the tavern until someone competent shows up. Decisions are of grave consequence. Build walls or upgrade your healer, add a second lumberjack or a pyromancer with impulse control issues. You never really have time to answer these questions because you're also managing random relics, biome modifiers, and events like taxes being due or a goat uprising. The game launched in early access in April of 2024 and already feels like a medieval crisis management with a retro twist, where success means your kingdom lasted longer than the last one, and failure means your necromancer just exploded again, and nobody is coming to save you. Number 22. Magicraft. Magicraft plays as a top-down action roguelike, where fights are fast, crowded, and constantly asking for footwork. But the real hook sits one menu layer deeper. You build your offense by slotting spells and modifiers into a staff, and the order they sit in, they fire in that sequence. That creates a loop that keeps on looping. You'll clear a room, grab a new piece, open the wand screen, rearrange your whole setup, and then step back into the next room to see if your setup is actually worth a damn. The presentation helps sell that tinkering mood, with loud, colorful magic effects splashing across a fantasy world that's dripping with a dark spoof tone. There is complexity here that comes from a few interlocking pressures that keeps on tightening the screws. The first is sequencing. One small change in slot order can flip a wand from reliable to a pit of chaos, which makes experimentation feel like the main progression system. The second is resource management. Because the old mana is tied to the wand, more power is only good if you can actually afford to keep firing. This encourages you into making your builds more sustainable. The third is loadout juggling. Since carrying multiple wands is normal, you end up respecting them like different tools rather than replacements. The fourth is the run's deal-making layer, with relics, curses, shops, and forging-style upgrades shaping what is practical and what will get you rigidly escorted back to the start screen. The best runs are the ones where the wand keeps paying its own bills under pressure, and you can bolt on one more ridiculous idea without turning the room into something that can be seen from space. Number 23. Picayune Dreams. You'll play as Syl, a cyborg girl adrift in the void, and the local wildlife has decided that your personal space is an obstacle to be overcome. This game is a top-down roguelike that joins bullet heaven horde survival with ruthless boss fights, so most of the run is kiting swarms, and then suddenly you're dodging a boss pattern that looks like it was designed by someone who hates circles on principle alone. Enemies shred into floating XP numbers, and every level up offers 3 upgrades with descriptions that you'd swear were written by a computer that learned English by watching error messages. What makes it interesting is how much build space it hides inside the chaos. There are 55 total upgrades, with unlocks tied to pushing modules during runs, so experimenting actually expands your future options, which is lovely incentive. You'll pick suits to shape your starting conditions and spend skill points in a loadout tree between runs, so you can crank overdrive higher and higher, resulting in the game ceasing to be polite. There is even a loose story delivered in fragmented memories for anyone who wants their neon space massacre to come with some emotional subtext. Picayune Dreams is a glowing sci-fi stress test, where the reward for surviving is more upgrades and a slightly clearer understanding that the void was never going to let you have a calm evening. Number 24 is VOIN. This game is all about ruthless close-range hack-and-slash combat where movement is just as important as damage output because enemies come in groups and are dying to give you a big old violent hug. The basic rhythm is as so: head out from the hub into large open-world-like areas, carve through whatever shows up, vacuum up gear, and then get back to home and sort the pile in ways that make you scarier to the locals. Its essence is roguelike adjacent, mostly because of the repeated high-risk outings and the constant remix of what you'll find out there, but some would say it's more of a Souls-like than a roguelite, but I'm going to include it anyway, and you can't stop me. The real personality comes from the item system and how much power it gives you to reshape your loadout. Gear perks are the rat's titties, and the hub lets you reforge, upgrade, and even combine items into new hybrids, which turns the crafting station into a place where complacency goes to retire. The catalog of items is enormous, with a ridiculous number of possible combinations, so builds tend to form through scavenging, testing, and realizing too late that you built something powerful yet completely unaffordable to swing for more than a few seconds. Early access updates also push deeper into progression, adding talent choices and slot-in bonuses, so each outing feeds 2 tracks at once: immediate loot upgrades and long-term character shaping. The extraction cadence keeps the pressure on, with every trip challenging you to pick between a safe return and a greedy detour that ends with your guts spread on the ground like jelly. Review aggregate right now is overwhelmingly positive, so get out there and show them what you're made of. Number 25. The Void Reigns Upon Her Heart. You are the heart of an alien woman trapped in a cave, surrounded by flying monsters that represent anxiety, trauma, and the sort of intrusive thoughts that show up at 2 a.m. to critique your haircut. Your response? Shoot them with love bullets until they feel better. Yeah. The Void Reigns Upon Her Heart is a boss rush bullet hell roguelite where you go one-on-one against increasingly deranged bosses who want to hurt you emotionally and physically. There are over 100 of them, each with their own personalities and attack patterns. Every time you win, the monster learns to love, which is something like a metaphor for healing or Stockholm Syndrome with particle effects. They also give you a gift because nothing says recovery like weaponized gratitude. The gift pool is over 600 items deep, so your runs turn into a splendid grab bag of conditional power-ups, defensive gimmicks, bizarre synergies, and whatever else the game feels like blessing or sabotaging you with. Dodge patterns get increasingly dense. Your combo meter wants you to never get hit, and you've got panic attacks as a mechanic because the metaphors just keep freaking coming. Between runs, meta progression will save your progress with hundreds of unlocks, new monsters, new gifts, new characters with distinct mechanics, and entire modes like Quick Play, Tower Rush, and Endless Nightmare, which is just you versus every boss forever until you either ascend or disintegrate. Despite looking like an alien dating sim designed by a benevolent cave gremlin, the game tackles actual mental health struggles in a way that's weirdly sincere. It's also been in early access since 2018, and I know what you're thinking. This game is absolutely not abandoned, and once you start to understand the depth of this game, you'll develop an appreciation for what's taking so long. Oh, and it's a solo dev too, so I mean crap, give him a break. Leap-a-pa-bum. Number 26. Talented. What we have right here is an arcade roguelite shoot 'em up where the screen fills with enemies, and your job is to stay upright, and your reward for surviving is more responsibility. Your nights are waves that keep classic arcade pressure, dodging, firing, and watching your run skim between under control, and I have made a mistake that is visible on the dark side of the moon territory. Between those fights, the game hands you its signature toy, a randomly generated talent tree that becomes your build map for the run. Instead of picking from a tidy upgrade menu, you navigate a big branching web of skills, choosing a route and hoping the next node is helpful rather than a middle finger with stats attached. The overall experience is a constant tug of war between short-term survival and long-term planning, and the talent tree is the reason. Each run asks you to read a path in front of you, grab upgrades that keep you alive right now, and angle toward combos that will matter once the later nights crank the heat up. Each class shifts what upgrades even mean, so the same tree structure can play very differently depending on the kit that you brought in. The scale is the fun and the trap. Hundreds of talents and a big pool of abilities means that you can have real build build variety, plus a few moments where you realize you accidentally invented something powerful and also completely impossible to manage, like love. A compendium helps you keep track of what things do, and endless mode exists for anyone who finishes the 20-night challenge and decides their free time deserves less free time. For anyone who enjoys turning panic into progress, this one's for you.
Number 28. Dungeons of Blood and Dream.
Very good. This game throws you into a sprawling fever chamber of procedural hallways and enemies that look like they were designed by a committee of medieval plague victims. You are a blood wizard, which means you solve most problems with ritual violence and wearable parasites. The dungeon reconfigures every time you enter. Potions can have randomized effects, and rings behave differently depending on which finger you wear them, like they're picky about your hand modeling career or something. The game keeps the pressure high with tight spaces and fast fights, but it also keeps feeding you powerful gear, which is good because confidence is one of the resources you'll spend the fastest. Between runs, unlocks expand what can show up in future attempts, widening your options and your replay value, and so you'll keep circling back to the time-honored extraction decision. Leave now with a good haul, or push deeper for better rewards and a potentially brutal reminder for why you shouldn't do that. Beneath the grime, though, it is a tight, smart game, pulling very positive reviews on Steam. For a game built around hemorrhaging, it really holds together well. That's a terrible joke. Number 29. CleanFall. CleanFall is a sandbox survival roguelike where your main duty is tunneling deeper through a living subterranean world while assembling a mobile base that can survive whatever crawls out of the walls next. The gameplay swings between digging out new routes, scraping together resources, and getting jumped at the exact moment you started feeling a level of competence. Then the build side takes over. Turrets come from shops and strange vending machine stops, so you bolt them onto your structure and you start treating your base like a traveling science project. Of course, where there's fun, there's stress. Shipbuilding means your defenses are not a static little fort. There's something you can strap thrusters onto and haul deeper, so layout is very important, especially once fights get messy and space becomes a resource. Turret alchemy pushes the run variety because combining defenses can turn a basic setup into something specialized, and it also encourages the classic roguelike behavior of overcommitting to an idea that you barely understand. Perks will add a slow layer of personal growth for your bot, which is helpful because the underground keeps remixing what it offers, so your ability to adapt becomes the real skill ceiling. If this sounds like a lot, it's because it is, but it's the good kind of a lot. The kind where you finish a run in the most painful way possible, but can't wait to smack the restart button and lose all over again. Number 30. Rabbit and Steel. Rabbit and Steel takes the whole MMO raid experience, compresses it into a clean little roguelike, and then hands the raid leader role to a rabbit with a sword. This game is built around boss fights, with combat that intentionally borrows from tab-target MMOs. Global cooldown pacing, smart skill timing, gear effects that reshape what your buttons do, and big telegraphed mechanics that ask the group to move with purpose. The art is adorable, which is great because it softens the blow when you wipe to a glowing snail. Early bosses teach the language of the game, and then later fights start to stack the mechanics so that the safe space gets smaller and smaller, so winging it becomes a short-lived lifestyle choice. Bullet curtains overlap with arena mechanics, and a single missed dodge can turn into a chain reaction where the party's plan collapses like an off-brand Lego set. At the same time, your build ramps up between fights as you grab loot and upgrades, and it's interesting how effects can compound, turning a reliable kit into something that spikes harder, covers more ground, or saves the teammate at exactly the right moment. The pressure comes from that push and pull. You are getting stronger, but the bosses scale their demands faster, so you keep making better decisions about cooldown timing, positioning, and whether your new shiny upgrade is genius or a legally binding piece of dookie. By the end, it's a raid clear earned in the least dignified way possible, with flawless execution and cartoon rabbits. Number 31, Stick It to the Stickman. The corporate ladder has a lot of steps, and Stick It to the Stickman decides the most efficient way to take them is by uppercutting everyone who owns a tie. It's a physics-drenched roguelike brawler where you start as a gloomy stick figure in a hostile workplace and work your way upward through office floors by turning meetings into contact sport. The fights are messy and hilarious, with ragdoll impacts and improvised weapons that make your encounters feel just like the old stick fighting videos from ancient times. It's simple to pick up because the game communicates in a universal language. You hit the red stick man until your career prospects improve. The variety comes from how many ways it lets you build your own personal brand of workplace violence. You stack moves and weapons into a run kit, choosing from a huge pool of attacks from dragon punches to arcadey uppercuts, and the game backs it with a pile of classes and modes so runs don't blur together. It knows exactly what it is, a replayable mischief machine dressed like an intern, and it's a must-play for anyone who can appreciate corporate satire as much as any other boardroom brawl any other day. Number 32, Fights in Tight Spaces. If you've ever wanted to be Jason Bourne with the spatial awareness of a chess master and the social graces of a punch to the throat, Fights in Tight Spaces is your invitation. You're a lone operative dropped into compact, highly flammable combat scenarios where each turn is a performance review conducted with your fists. It's turn-based tactics meets deck building, with a clean UI and more stylish knockouts than a Cologne ad. Each mission is an isometric brawl ballet where you shuffle, strike, vault, and occasionally sprint through windows like a man with a diplomacy allergy. With a stacked deck and some experience, the game starts to feel like you brought a plan, plus backup plans, plus a plan for the backup plan's emotional support. The strongest decks tend to be lean, full of cheap movement and control, so you can keep cycling and keep dictating where everyone stands. That's when fights get spicy. A shove becomes an attack because it breaks a formation, a reposition sets up a knockback, and a defensive card turns an enemy's turn into free damage. Between missions, you'll patch yourself up, buy new moves, and figure out what build you're going for. There's a permanent mode too, for those who want to watch their carefully cultivated deck dissolve in round 2 and call it learning. It's as slick as it is sharp, letting you live out your fantasy to die in a cramped bathroom surrounded by hostile ninjas. That's your fantasy too, right? Bleep-a-ba-bum. Number 33, Ballionaire. A run of Ballionaire starts with a single ball and a dream, and then swiftly becomes a lesson in why casinos have carpeting. It's a pachinko and pinball roguelike. Yeah, that's a thing, where the action is mostly you dropping a ball into a board and watching physics do the dirty work. But the strategy is real, because bounces are only as good as the machine you build around them. After each drop, you draft a new trigger or boon and bolt it onto the board, so the run is basically an evolving contraption that's both a money printer and self-inflicted audit. Early on, it feels like a cute little scoring toy, and then the targets rise and the room starts expecting results. Once your board is stacked, the chaos becomes surprisingly legible, and that's where it gets addictive. You start building for chain reactions. One hit spawns another ball, that ball hits something that duplicates a payout, and so a single drop turns into a small weather system of ricochets and pop-offs. Different boards change what good even means, so you're constantly tuning the machine to survive the next set of rules, rarely admiring your own genius for too long. The best runs have that feeling of watching a plan work just as you've imagined, with the added bonus that the plan is a ball repeatedly slamming into things, and what could be more satisfying than that? Number 34, ROBOBEAT. This is a movement shooter with a metronome as a co-pilot. You'll be sprinting through a neon techno mansion as a bounty hunter, chasing a robot showman, and the game will ceaselessly reward you for doing two things at once, staying fast and shooting on beat. This is one of them parkour FPS with all the I meant to do that acrobatics, while the rhythm layer acts as a performance bonus. Land shots in time with the track, and you hit harder and cycle your abilities faster. The roguelike structure keeps remixing the mansion, so it's all about adapting your route and loadout while the music keeps pushing you forward. Weapons and mods change the texture of each run, and once you get comfortable, you start treating the beat like another part of your body, timing reload windows and room entries so that your tempo stays useful. The wildcard is the custom music feature, because the game will happily let you import your own tracks and generate beats from them, which turns your playlist into a weapon all its own. When the beat claps with the muzzle flash, the combat really does flow like water, and you'll be glad to nod along to the tune. Number 35, Star of Providence. Have you ever wanted to play a screensaver that's turned hostile? Well, now's your chance. You'll drift in, threading dense bullet patterns in a top-down arena where hesitation gets itemized and billed to you in a hurry. This is a run-based bullet hell through a procedurally assembled sci-fi facility, built around quick clears and constant movement, and the pacing all the while staying tighter than any shoelace. The game has a big pool of weapons with odd variants, plus cartridges that act like run-shaping modifiers, so your build can swing from precise and controlled to a science experiment that technically counts as a tax write-off. There are 40 plus weapons and cartridges, and multiple playable ships with different base stats as well as starting weapons, so you need not pigeonhole yourself. Boss fights are short, high-pressure go-arounds, and the included practice mode is basically the game admitting that studying is allowed. It also supports rimming into harder runs, and big updates like Into Oblivion helped expand and refine the modern version of the game. It's brutally fair and well polished, and its overwhelmingly positive Steam reception might agree with me. Number 36, BlazBlue Entropy Effect. This is what happens whenever an anime, along with a sea of epilepsy-triggering punches, and a rogue AI gets stuck in an elevator and decide to co-parent a side-scrolling roguelike. It's, needless to say, intense and deeply committed to kinetic overkill. You pick from a stable of flashy warriors who seem to have memorized entire martial arts libraries and dumped every special effect filter onto their fists. Each run involves being dropped into a simulation pretending to be a city, filled with enemy mobs who mostly exist to help you practice air juggling. The movement is sharp, the combat is slick, and the difficulty ramps with a grin you'll learn to recognize right before you get whooped. The meat of the game is in the builds. Every class has branching skill trees that rewrite your style completely, and between the elemental buffs, synergies, and stackable traits, you'll go from cautious footwork to breakdancing through explosions in about 15 minutes. The arenas warp and shift, bosses show up with movesets that'll make you sing, and the upgrade economy makes you gamble between comfort or firepower. BlazBlue is a roguelike where the build craft is your moveset, leading to an endless string of scenarios where your hands did something insanely cool while your brain was busy panicking. It's a damn good time, and it's a must-play for anyone who's lost untold hours of their life to Dead Cells. Number 37, Dead Estate. What we're talking about here is a top-down roguelike shooter set in a mansion that clearly has zoning issues. You pick a character and start climbing floor by floor through compact rooms packed with monsters, loot, and yeah, that's about it. So the pace is brisk because the game doesn't want you sightseeing. It wants you clearing rooms at a double time, grabbing whatever drops and moving on like a good breakup. The fun part is how quickly a run can turn into a little ecosystem of items supporting each other. Take Deadeye, an item that locks you to 1 HP but doubles your damage and fire rate, and then pair it with room entry invulnerability like Guardian Angel or regenerating invulnerability like Fancy Shield, and suddenly the world's worst health plan becomes a promising strategy. There are over 150 weapons and 300 items, and the run variety shows up in that constant scramble of decisions. Take the weird new gun, stack another item and change how shots behave, gamble on a blessing, accept a curse, sell your house, go to the casino, put it all on black. The mansion has alternate floors and variants, so the route can morph, but it always keeps the movement rhythm tight. There's a lot to unlock and a lot to master, so it never loses that arcade aura, where speed and reflexes take the place of best laid plans. Number 38 is Nine Kings. In this game, you'll be initiated onto a sleek tactical grid and handed a deck of position-based attacks, traps, and shoves. Life is all about smart decisions here. Upgrades happen by placing a duplicate card directly on top of what you've already built. Spells can bolt on new effects, and some structures reward smart neighbor placement with extra power. And then you hit start and watch your pixel army do its job, while you stare at the board like the talented city planner that you are. These runs will escalate by layering the defeated king's mechanics into future encounters. Kill the teleporting one? Well, cool, now everyone teleports. The guy who floods half the board with lava? He's dead, but his lava's alive and well. As your deck grows, the combos get richer, chaining knockbacks into spikes, pulling enemies into pits, and laying down directional attacks like you're programming a death Roomba. But Space Titans, hazards stack, and sooner or later you reach the conclusion the real boss is the floor itself. There are no wasted cards here, only missed opportunities and beautifully telegraphed doom that'll keep you coming back for more and more. Number 39, Streets of Rogue. There are games where you play as a noble knight, or maybe a reluctant chosen one, and then there's Streets of Rogue, where you can be a cannibal investment banker smashing a refrigerator in the back of a bar so you can bribe a gang leader with a banana. Intrigued? Listen on. This is a top-down roguelike wrapped in immersive sim goodness, with classes that modify the rulebook. You can be a hacker who shuts down entire buildings, a vampire who just skips the pleasantries and drinks everyone, or a gorilla leading a prison break. All in the same run. Each floor is a tiny urban sandbox full of faction beefs, surveillance cameras, shopkeepers, alarms, and the occasional drug-induced gang war. Your runs will start in the slums, but as you move into the city's higher districts, the tension ratchets up fast. Industrial zones add lasers, traps, and more armed guards. Downtown floods the streets with cameras and cops, and by uptown you're dealing with gated communities, mayoral propaganda, and a citywide mutator like people are now explosive when sneezed on. Between levels, you gain perks in the form of silent footsteps, bullet resistance, or maybe one where all melee weapons are now sausages. Things will stack and slip beyond your control fast. One wrong door hack and suddenly you're fighting a dozen mobsters with only a chloroform rag and a boombox. But if the build clicks, if the perks align, and your class fits the chaos just right, you're not just surviving, you're running a one-person insurgency with a taser, a cardboard box, and a dream. Number 40, Rogue Genesia. A run in this game starts about how you'd expect, with you stepping into a stage and immediately getting introduced to several hundred enemies who have objections about your continued existence. We're talking about a bullet heaven action roguelite where you face down swarms in top-down arenas, scoop experience, and level up enough that your build evolves into something unfathomable. The look glistens with that crisp HD 2D style, so while the screen turns into a murder zone, it at least does it with good lighting. Where it gets crazy is how aggressively your powers can combine. You can run Thunderstaff and let orbiting orbs grind anything that gets too close, while Magic Wisp sends a homing sprite that bounces between targets and also clips anything it passes through on the chase, so the fight starts looking like a pinball machine that's fueled by DPS. Add Fire Ring and now you're detonating periodic blasts around yourself that ignite enemies with burn damage that stacks, turning the incoming horde into your personal bonfire. And then if you want to be a real gremlin, pick up Portal Shard and your projectiles loop from one side of the screen to the other, so missed shots come back like they forgot their keys. Or evolve into Singularity Gland, which drops black holes that restrict enemy movement because the correct answer to being outnumbered might be astrophysics. All of this leads to a gameplay loop that stays satisfying because it rewards experimentation without punishing you for having fun with it. Taken together, it becomes a tight, escalating loop that belongs in the action roguelike conversation. A conversation that we're all better off having had.